Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Dworkin. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Good morning, everybody, from the Twilight Zone of February 29th, 2016. I guess not our first leap year on the air, is it? I don't know. Well, the last one would have been... Were we on the air in February 2012? Probably not. Maybe it is our first leap year on the air. Wow, amazing. Happy birthday to my nephew, by the way, actually a February 29th birthday. And, I don't give out the names on the air, but, I would say you know who you are, but you're not listening to the show because you're 1/4, depending on how you look at things. One of those little February 29th tricks. First actual birthday, I guess, and, minus the actual day on which he was born, as one of my kids pointed out. But here we are in that weird Twilight Zone bonus show. For those of you listening, there are ordinarily only 28 days in the month of February, as you may be aware. This one is the 29th. The Carmine said 28 days. Here are 29. Does anybody remember? Okay. All right. So let's see what happened yesterday. There were the Oscars, as it turns out. I usually don't watch them, but I had to go and tune in a little bit because Chris Rock. I think Chris Rock is pretty good. And guess what? There was all this controversy about the Oscars being so white, and then they had this black host, you see? So then they're trying over there. But, anyway, he put on a great show, a fantastic opening monologue, which, of course, I didn't get to see. I did watch a little bit of the Oscars live on TV, but you know how I am with television. It's 9 o'clock. It's time for the kids to start getting ready for bed. I don't know what happens around 9 o'clock in this country or in the world, really, other than what happens in my house. But I got a transcript of it. It was fantastic. He's a genius at making people just uncomfortable enough to know that there's something serious there, but it doesn't put everybody off their feed, I guess, which, I don't know. I suppose some would say, well, that's not enough. You're really supposed to. But I don't know. I think he's a genius at walking that line. And he's certainly like one of the funniest guys in the world. So anyway, I really appreciated that. Didn't see any of the movies, but that's okay. Oh, best, you know what I liked best, by the way, even better than the monologue, the opening monologue, which was terrific, was the pre-recorded bit he did on the street asking black moviegoers what they thought about the movies that were up for the Oscars. Or really, did you see this one or that one? We kind of do move in different circles, don't we? I don't know. Maybe I'm I'm not a more black moviegoer. I didn't go to any of the movies that they went to, but I didn't go to any of these movies either because I didn't go to anything. But I thought that was really revealing. Can you imagine? It's probably the first time that much of Hollywood woke up to the fact that a significant portion of America not only doesn't go to your movies, that much they know, but doesn't even know what they are or even possibly who you are. I thought that was really pretty interesting. Anyway, not exactly the most revelatory of bits of information. Over the weekend, of course, Donald Trump somehow managed to avoid disavowing the Ku Klux Klan on television along with David Duke. He now says that he had a bad earpiece and couldn't understand what he was being asked, and he does, in fact, disavow David Duke. That's not really news either in that he has. I mean, he's disavowed David Duke in the last week. So I was a little bit at a loss as to why he wasn't doing that again. As for the KKK thing, I don't know. I mean, we can go over it, but does anybody believe that he doesn't know what the Ku Klux Klan is? I guess the only possibility I entertain for that being actually anything like true is I guess I could imagine that a child of privilege who grows up rich and stays extraordinarily rich and just, moves in a world where there are no problems and nothing awful happens to him because money protects him, that he never becomes aware of such things. But he's a smart enough guy that he can read the newspapers. I don't know how you avoid it. I don't know what his excuse was. Doesn't really matter. And as predicted, it makes no difference whatsoever. Basically, what ends up happening is he's asked on the air if he can disavow these guys. He says he's not really sure. The press is outraged. I mean, come on, the KKK. But, as usual, to what does the press's outrage amount? Nothing. Booking on Monday. Won't disavow. You won't disavow the Ku Klux Klan? No. Oh, my God. This is it. This is it. This is the worst thing. This is the death of his campaign. Make sure that guy is on my air Monday. And so he was, to come on and say, it's really the fault of the earpiece, which, of course, means that, once again, he was phoning it in from somewhere else, sitting in a house, he said, in Florida. They can't get this guy. If you just come into class and do your work, Trump, you won't have these kinds of problems. Anyway, I don't know what the hell else happened this weekend, because that's all I saw from my errands, but I've got Greg Dworkin here. He reads the newspapers almost every day. So good morning, Greg. Glad to hear you've got the power back on.
We got the power.
How's the painting? Were they able to do that without the power?
They couldn't do it because they couldn't do it. It's just too much going on. But they'll be back today, so expect the doorbell to go off in the middle of the show. These things happen.
The doorbell's not dependent on. Well, does the doorbell ring when you have no power? I don't know.
Yeah, she does.
Okay.
she barks a lot, so
okay. She's not battery operated.
She's good for that, so I expect that to go off.
Okay.
So listen, there's a lot going on. I have to say about the Donald Trump KKK thing, we have to put this in proper perspective. What it really is first of all a pretty obvious ripping off the cover and showing people that folks like Jeff Sessions and Steve Scalise, who represent the Republican Party in Washington, are in fact part of the southern white nature of the Republican Party and truly represent them. And what it does is because so many Republicans don't like to acknowledge that, what Trump did actually allows them to say, oh my goodness, I'm not voting for this guy, which they were looking for an excuse for. I mean, I have some examples here, and I think that it's only going to get worse before it gets better. Let's go back to the stuff I sent you here. So we already had a Robert Kagan editorial about how he will vote for Hillary before he ever votes for Trump, and also coming from the neocon wing of the party. I'm sure these guys wanted Rubio, but they're not getting him. Max Boot, who writes, I'm a lifelong Republican, but Trump's surge proves that every bad thing Democrats have ever said about the GOP is basically true. Never Trump.
Right.
Stuart Stevens, a vote for Donald Trump is a vote for bigotry. There's winning, and then they're supporting a bigot. If the GOP lines up behind Trump, it doesn't deserve to be taken seriously anymore.
Yeah.
There's other stuff. Christie Todd Whitman from the so-called liberal wing of the party wishes to say only slightly to the right of George W. Bush. But what is confirmed is what the polls say. And I have the latest this morning CNN poll showing both Trump and Clinton doing quite well nationally. And an important question was asked, and that is, for example, if Hillary Clinton won the Democratic Party's nomination for the presidency, would you definitely support her? Asked of Democrats in the general election, probably, probably not, or definitely not. Okay. And the definitely not for Hillary is 20.
All right.
20% of Democrats say they would never support her. If you ask the same question of Bernie, it's 6%, although she's blowing him out in this poll. On the other hand, if you ask the same question of Republicans, the definitely not support him for Donald Trump. Remember, Hillary's number is 20. Donald Trump's is 35 among Republicans.
Okay.
That is not both parties do it.
Oh, it's not? Why not?
Because 35 is greater than 20.
But they both were numbers.
They are. And if you reverse the numbers, then 53 is greater than 02. It doesn't matter. I mean, the fact of the matter is you not only have people declaring that they won't vote for Trump, there's going to be a Republicans for Hillary movement.
Yes. Why won't Hillary
It's already
lead,
starting.
by the way?
What's that?
As long as we're already starting, why won't Hillary lead?
Well, actually, we'll get to that.
Okay. I'm just wondering about that. In the definitely won't vote for category, I noticed she doesn't lead. Why won't she?
Well, actually, Trump leads her on that.
Why won't she?
So the actual numbers from the CNN poll, which are semi-interesting.
Okay.
For registered voters who plan to register to vote, are you extremely enthusiastic or very enthusiastic, somewhat, not too, or not at all? And the extremely enthusiastic is 25 and very enthusiastic is 27. So half the population thinks it's okay. If you ask this of Democrats, it's 23 and 29, extremely and very. And if you ask of Republicans, it's 31 and 27. It's not really all that different. And today, Philip Bump asked a very interesting question, which I've been asking all along, and a little story about that. You know, one of our good friends over at Daily Kos wrote Brooklyn Bad Boy wrote this whole piece about how, noting that the Democratic numbers in the 4 states that have already voted are much less than 2008. Does this send worrisome signals? Because the Republicans are setting records in their primaries. The Democrats are not. And what does that mean? And before assuming it meant anything, I asked some political scientists what they thought, and they basically said it's really hard to tell. It's kind of a mixed bag. It doesn't automatically mean that the Republicans have an advantage, and the reason is 2008 was extraordinary. That's the benchmark you're using. And 2016 on the Republican side is a circus with a celebrity. And it's a real race, at least it was up till now, on the Republican side, whereas on the Democratic side it was more or less a foregone conclusion for much of the year. Then Bernie did great, and then Hillary's doing much better now. And it's still not the same kind of dynamic that you have on the Republican side, where third means you're winning and first means you're in denial. I mean, it's just a completely different animal. So you can't do that, and you can't even look back and look historically and get too much in terms of that. There's n equals 6, you know, there isn't enough there. So Philip Bump wrote that up today. Republicans are voting more than Democrats in 2016. Will that matter in November? And goes through all of those numbers. And in the end, basically says it's a mixed bag. 3 contests with a whole slew of different factors. In 2016, the Democrats had an obvious frontrunner, Hillary Clinton, and a challenger who doesn't seem poised to repeat Barack Obama's upset. The Republicans, on the other hand, have one of the most interesting contested races in years. And that's true. I've always told you that I thought the Republican side was more interesting. I've been saying that for months. And, in fact, the voters agree. So we don't know what the turnout advantage means, if anything. We should perhaps expect that a race with a frontrunner like Clinton, however tough her past few months, would have lower turnout than the Republican side. Whether that means she'll win or lose is a totally different question. He ends his piece. And again, I go back to that CNN poll and the anecdotal discussions, including this Ryan Lizard piece, the dilemma of conservatives who say they'll never vote for Donald Trump. And I have a lot of them in my timeline, probably because the only conservatives I can have a constructive dialogue with on Twitter are the types of conservatives who would never vote for Donald Trump. So I believe it just based on the polling plus anecdotes. There are really people like that who say, I will not do this. Erica Grider, we talk about a lot from Texas Monthly, will not vote for Trump. And the other list I gave you, plus this generic dilemma of conservatives who say they'll never vote for Trump, I think it's all true. And I think the polling that says 35% of Republicans won't do it is, in fact, absolutely correct.
Well, I do believe that there are such people. Of course, I also do believe that there are people who will say that now and then throw it all away in the end. But
that's why I discard the probably won't. You know, those probably won'ts or probably will. But the definitely won'ts, they really feel strongly about this.
There are such people, yes. And I'm sure they'll hold to it. I don't know what they will do, but we'll see. I don't know.
Anyway, some stuff. This is all speculative because we'll see what happens. Super Tuesday's tomorrow. And right now, Trump is leading in the polls, but there's been a online Rubio-mentum that isn't sustained by any actual data that suggests that he's taken it to Trump, and therefore that's a good thing, except, you know, somebody observed it's like watching the guy running for a high school president being taken on by the guy running for middle school president. The insults have to do with how Trump applies makeup on his face and other silly things, and Trump is talking about Rubio's water bottle. None of it is substance. And a lot of it is a little bit too little and too late. One of the things about the KKK piece, however, is that Trump doing this outrageous thing and then doing what he does best, which is capturing the media cycle for a day or two, takes away the actual and real attacks, which ought to be Rubio calling Trump a con man and talking about Trump University, where he ripped off people. And, in fact, that's going to be in court probably sometime during the race, which is another reason why I think Hillary will win.
Well, yeah, I did notice that Rubio was starting this new tack. And, I mean, as entertainment goes, he did relatively well with it. He's been pretty lame to this point, and I don't know whether
you can't out
Trump.
Trump. So the entertainment part of it, it's got to have substance to it, or it's not going to work.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly something behind it, and I don't know. I liked the line, and you got a few zingers in there, but no one was there, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, I remind my viewers and listeners, and you remember this, of course. Lloyd Benson had the best singer ever, and of course he lost.
Right. There you go. It doesn't really do too much, but better performance. It just so what?
Yeah, and became legend and lore, and we repeat it all the time. But the reminder is he lost.
Right.
Anyway, let's go back to actual data, because I think there is some interesting stuff here, and I have to start out by saying, my tweets yesterday and today had to do with Bernie Sanders more than Hillary, and that is that when you sink your heart into a primary, it's really hard to wrap your head around the fact that your candidate may not win. And so I think everybody just has to chill a little bit, and triumphalism has no place whatsoever. What Bernie's done is bring up issues that are vital. What Bernie's done is brought millennials and independents potentially into the Democratic tent, and I'm fine with him continuing to run whatever happens tomorrow. And I think that that's all important to say. And again, anybody who happens to be a Hillary supporter, just stuff it. Just don't dance on Bernie's grave, because he ain't dead yet. But the fact is that South Carolina happened, and it was an incredible blowout, much more than people were expecting.
We
the
were
only
to
poll
talk
that
to
got
you
it
after that.
right was a Clemson poll, I think. But look at this Wyeth Ruffin tweet from the other day. The share of South Carolina black vote. Clinton in 2016 got 86% of that vote.
Yes.
In fact, among older black women, I think she got 96, 98, some incredible. I can't believe it. That must be a mistype. Obama in 2008 got 78.
Well,
Edwards in 2004 got 36. Kerry in 2004 got 32. Sharpton in 2004 got 19. Clinton in 2008 got 19. Clinton in 2008 got 19. Clinton in 2016 got 86.
Yeah. It was a different one. 08. Okay, I see.
08.
All right.
That's Hillary.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, that makes some sense. It was like
Sanders got 14.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that.
That's not okay. And that was the big problem with the Sanders campaign. And in fact, I thought one of the better pieces to look at that, and we'll take a look at the exit polls in just a minute. And this is not, again, to rub it in Bernie supporters' noses. It's to look at what's going on with the campaign. And I thought one of the best pieces to really do this was Janelle Ross, what Hillary Clinton's massive win among black voters really says. And basically, the future of the Republican Party is in doubt, because I think this KKK Donald Trump stuff is ripping it apart. The future of the Democratic Party seems to be pretty clear. It has to be a multi-ethnic, multi-diverse, multi-racial coalition. It has to be. And so what Janelle Ross writes is, there's another story, one that hides in plain sight but may well be ignored. Look closely at the exit poll data, which we'll do in a minute. And the indicators of a massive win for Clinton, there's evidence of substantial but far from record-setting overall primary turnout there, too. That is to say, they were low, but the percentage of black voters in that primary went from 55, which is what it was in 2008 when Obama won, to 61. 60 or 61. I don't remember the exact number, but it was up. The percentage of blacks voting was up. Black voters turned out and voted in large numbers relative to other Democrats, giving their numerical majority within the party added meaning. Black voters in South Carolina cast 6 in every 10 Democratic primary votes. The ratio is huge and sets a record high in South Carolina black voter participation rate. And by the way, there's other states to come, including Georgia, tomorrow, that have even higher black to white ratios on the Democratic side.
Well, That's hey, good for you. Finally, I mean, really kicking some serious butt. And I say finally, but I mean, getting the recognition. Really,
yes.
This is a time, by the way, once this is all said and done, for the black communities to be pressing for leadership roles in the state parties that they haven't traditionally captured in all the states where they turn out in these numbers.
So, if you're trailing black voters, if you're trailing with black voters by over 50, 55 points, It isn't just a minor talking point. It is a major candidate flaw. She goes on to write, this is what Democratic voter turnout looks like. And get used to it. This is what the future will look like for the Democratic Party. These are its outcomes when black voters are convinced of their ability and authority to fundamentally shape American democracy, and I would add, and are allowed to vote. It is a result that should begin to crush the popular and often repeated myth that black political behavior in 2008 and 2012 was nothing more than a blip, a fleeting kind of emotion-only engagement inspired by a singular and history-making black candidate. That ain't what it was. Okay? And the South Carolina result challenges almost directly the rather standard and presumptive claim that the party, which is home to the most racially and ethnically diverse array of voters, must leave the earliest and most influential choice about its presidential candidate to two states that look very little like the party or the country. That would be Iowa and New Hampshire. The argument that voters in Iowa and New Hampshire are somehow specially trained or primed and therefore take the responsibility seriously in some sort of unique way seems largely emotional, even nostalgia-driven in light of the turnout results in far more diverse South Carolina, and I would add, to be reinforced tomorrow.
Wow. Oh, yeah, true.
Okay. If the turnout patterns and election outcomes look the same in most Super Tuesday states, consider that another blow. To put bluntly, in Iowa, Sanders' race-neutral message centered around a kind of economic inequality where a dastardly 1%, no race mention, fares well at the expense of the 99%, no race mention, thus creating unjust and untenable conditions that are the same in all the 99%'s lives, and that has some appeal. But it's also a message that allowed Clinton a narrow win in Iowa, a blowout loss in New Hampshire, a larger but not resounding victory in more diverse Nevada, and a massive win in South Carolina. There are reasons why this remains most appealing to young white liberal voters. For them, a race and gender neutral policy platform is most likely to seem sufficient to improve all Americans' lives. But other voters, especially those of color, may not be so readily convinced. To them, the limits of race-neutral policy, even when shaped, formed, and influenced by a black president, has been made plain during the Obama years. So what Clinton did, and this is the paragraph, there's a long intro, but this is the paragraph I really want to highlight. The Clinton campaign has stuck, just as her critics charge, to a rather safe, barely left-of-center, utterly non-radical list of reform priorities, and that's true, she writes. It really is, she writes. And I would say it really is because that's how you want to win in the general. But in her stump and issue-specific speeches, Clinton has referred to ways by which issues such as voter ID laws, gun violence, criminal justice, gender wage imbalances, and the long unchanged minimum wage directly and even more deeply shape and distort the lives of black and Latino Americans. The natural conclusion of that discussion is, here is what my policy will do for all of us, and here is what it will do for those Americans who actually or disproportionately have it worse. Now, voters have to decide whether or not to believe her, but that is what she said. Voters don't have to like explicit talk about race and ethnicity, but it's undeniable that for quite some time, this was a major difference between the Clinton and Sanders campaigns. Is there any tie into what Chris Rock did last night at the Oscars? He was pretty overtly racial about it without trying, as you pointed out, to be offensive about it. And Clinton's tried to do the same thing, and an argument can be made that Bernie hasn't been as skilled and or has avoided some of that, whereas Clinton has really drilled down to that. And, I'm not a black voter. I can only listen to my friends who tell me what's going on here. And that is to say, and again, this goes back to a discussion we had a long time ago, going back to 2007, we were talking about Obama versus Hillary. And we were in Chicago, and we were talking with a group at the same convention at the same hotel as us, who happened to be a group of Southern blacks who were there for, and I forget exactly what it was. I think it was a Black Mason convention.
Shriners.
I'm not sure.
No?
Was it Shriners?
I
It
think
could
it
have been
was.
Masons. I'm not sure. I apologize. I have to go back and look it up. But in any case, the idea was that you got to convince people that what they are saying actually has meaning for the voters that you are trying to convince. Don't just come every 4 years. And at the same time, don't assume that they're naive and can be swayed by an argument here or there that's made every 4 years. They know better than anybody that all candidates are flawed and all candidates will not deliver on what they promise, and that's not the question. The question is, are they sincere about it and will they try, and how much do you think you can actually get done? And that's a whole different thing than an aspirational kind of message that hopefully will work. Fill in the dots. It's not really clear how because the votes aren't there. I mean, and what's the result? South Carolina. Look at that vote.
I will. We should. And it's an extraordinary example of South Carolina.
Right.
by the way.
Demographics are not destiny, she concludes. They must be paired with political engagement and action, voting at the very least to deliver real influence and political say. What South Carolina's black voters, who comprise more than half of Democrats in that state, and 61% of those who cast ballots in the state's primary, said on Saturday they completely and totally get that.
We'll have to see how Georgia performs in that respect. I mean, I
Yes.
mentioned earlier about leadership on the state levels and national levels among black voters and their leadership. South Carolina, I mean, the results show it. This is not putting the cart before the horse. The leadership of the Democratic Party in South Carolina is, in fact, not only quite inclusive, but I mean, some serious power brokers in Democratic politics are black South Carolinian Democrats. Clyburn for a long time has been high up in the
James
House leadership.
Clyburn.
Yep. And
John
as it
Lewis
happens-
in Georgia, do not throw shade at these guys. Do not diss these guys. They know how to organize. They are our friends. And if it turns out that you are not winning their vote and support, the best thing to do is go back and figure out why are you not winning their vote and support rather than dismissing them in any way, shape, or form. I can't stress that lesson enough.
Mm-hmm. And and just a thing to remember at the end of the whole process in November, that Democrats have some work left to do, properly acknowledging the role of the people who really do show up at the polls and make things happen when Democrats win.
Right, and that includes Sanders supporters. So this is not a disrespectful remark. Janelle Ross finishes with this paragraph, which I think is really the heart of the whole thing here, my whole rant. The question for Sanders, his supporters, and those who wish to see his campaign continue is this. What do the changing demographics of America, of the Democratic Party, and a large number of voters of color expecting their experiences and priorities to share center stage now mean he must do differently? All right, so it isn't that, oh, well, Black Lives Matter challenged me, this is a barrier, I have to get a pass so that I can now talk about my economic message. The people of color who vote in primaries and general elections are at the heart of the Democratic Party, not simply a barrier to get around or some sort of problem to solve. They are us. They are the heart of what the Democratic Party is. And that message, I don't think, has been totally taken to heart by white liberals.
Well, it's not easy to live that in the same way, and it's going to be there's going to be translation issues no matter how you slice it. You can either be more accepting of it and and not only keep the door open, but to say, help me do this, help me guide us all the way through this election, as opposed to, well, let me mollify you. That's no longer going to work in states like this.
Or, in a slightly different way, don't white-splain Oscar's so white. Just shut up and listen.
That will help, yes. Well, all right. I mean, lesson, certainly if not lesson learned, then point well demonstrated. South Carolina, we were supposed to wait and talk to you afterwards, and I
this
guess
is
we
why.
have. That's true. All right. Well, moving forward then. Tuesday, tomorrow, it's a little late to change strategy for going into Super Tuesday, but then again, I mean, the path was laid out a long time ago. This is a Southern Super Tuesday, and I suppose it is now time to reap what was sown. And it looks like, in all indications are that the polling will deliver up results not dissimilar from South Carolina, if not at the same level in each of the states.
Not just in the places you expect. It's pretty clear that if you're looking on the Republican side, probably the most interesting state is Texas. And that's because Cruz is expected to win. And the question is going to be what the margin is and how close does Trump come.
Mm-hmm.
Of the three candidates, basically, Trump is running 40-45% nationally, and Cruz and Rubio have been 21-22, sometimes 22-21, and they flip positions. But Cruz has a very discreet path to the nomination. He has to win big in Texas, hold on everywhere else, and hope for a brokered convention. Rubio has to hope he finishes third everywhere, and therefore he can declare it a win, and then a magic thing occurs, and then he wins. But if Cruz, who happens to be incredibly unpopular, I mean, there are all these stories floating around now about how when Scalia died, Cruz tried to be part of the funeral party, and nobody would let him.
Mm-hmm.
The clerks wouldn't let him sit with the clerks, and the senators wouldn't let him sit with the senators because he's not leadership, and so on and so forth. But Texas is the key state for Trump. Massachusetts is the key state for the Democrats, and there's new polling out. And as you know, Bernie had a strategy of doing well in about 5 states and trying to get as many delegates as he could there, knowing he was going to lose certain states. Mm-hmm. So the polling, the latest from PPP was between 214 and 216, which is a political lifetime away. That was 2 weeks ago. Had Sanders up by 7. Emerson came out on the 19th through the 21st and found it was a tie. WBUR from the 21st to the 23rd had Clinton up by 5. And Suffolk came out last night and published in the Boston Globe this morning and has Clinton winning by 8, 50-42.
Okay.
So if Bernie loses Massachusetts, as well as getting blown out in the southern states, well, draw your own conclusions.
Okay. But we can afford to wait and see.
We can, because it's tomorrow. We don't have to wait all that long.
No, easy to do.
I think there may be, I'm not sure, but there may be one more Emerson poll coming out today.
Really?
So we'll see where that is. Emerson, remember, had him at a tie, so we'll see if, in fact, that is the case. In any case, though,
yes,
it's a very difficult road from this point on for Bernie, and so talking about, shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, there are some people that will simply never get to acceptance. I was having some interesting dialogue with a couple of hardcore Bernie supporters who were trying to convince me that if Bernie loses and Hillary wins, they'll vote for Trump. They were not doing a very good job.
Okay.
And that was before the KKK stuff was really highlighted online. But, why would you vote for the fascist? And the reasoning goes something along the lines of, well, if Hillary wins and runs against Trump, she'll destroy the Republican Party. But if I vote for Trump, that'll destroy the Democratic Party, and that's necessary because we have to start over.
I see.
So talk about cutting off your foot despite your, despite your face. It's just nuts. I mean, this is a fascist. How can you vote for a fascist? Well, because my guy lost, and I'm really upset.
My basic outlook on these things is, if I credit the idea at all that we're better off destroying the two parties and starting over,
to save them, right?
Fine, okay. My only insistence is you guys first, them first. So we got to destroy both parties, Republicans first, and once they're destroyed, I promise we'll destroy the Democratic Party too in due time. But can we start with them and usher in an era of, let's say, unilateral dominance of government in all phases by Democrats for a while, and then we'll destroy it afterwards when I'm done.
So before I move to my favorite topic, which is disrespecting Chris Christie, who, by the way, endorsed Trump over the weekend. This is ex post factoid. Chris Christie pads his place in hell with this comment. I'm full of optimism for when we get a strong leader in the White House and not the hand-wringing guy we have in the White House right now. Can you imagine the whiplash that America's enemies are going to feel when they go from a weakling like Barack Obama to a man of strength like Donald Trump? Now, I think right after he said these, or somewhere in when he was trying to endorse Trump, Trump basically turned to him, okay, you're done, go home now. There's your plane.
Right, yes.
A phenomenal diss of Christie, and that's what sparked Christie. Todd Whitman to say, I'm voting for Hillary. The people in his own state are just flabbergasted, but not surprised, because they know he is an opportunist of the highest degree. And what Chris Christie does is what's good for Chris Christie and nothing else. It's just that now it's fully exposed. And then Trump says his KKK thing, and so the question is, well, what's Christie going to do about that?
When is Christie going to start doing what's good for Christie?
I don't know, because nothing so far has been good for Christie.
I'm wondering, that's all he does,
Loser.
Really? But yet, yeah, so bit of a, Midas in reverse, I suppose. But, yeah, I haven't seen him do anything that he's helped himself with, certainly. Yeah, it was pretty craven, that's for sure. And there was as much time spent and as much ink spilled over the weekend on Donald Trump's refusing to disavow the KKK as there was amazement, apparently, at Christie's refusal to at least walk away, if not disavow, Donald Trump. But it's good to know he thinks he's such a strong man.
Well, Christie's endorsement was good for Trump for about 24 hours. What it did is it completely disrupted any momentum that was going on. It completely changed the story. Again, that's what Trump is good at. Just like the KKK part is good for changing stories from Trump University. Mm-hmm. But I have a series of New Jersey pieces here. Dramatic reversal for Christie the moderate. Whitman scorches Christie over Trump, prefers Hillary. How endorsing Trump put Christie back on the big stage only to be embarrassed in public. I edited that part. Christie's disgrace, that's from the Weekly Standard. One pseudo-tough talker endorses another from Stephen Hayes. There's a lot of angst on the Republican side and conservative side about this, which is more than just, in the end they'll just turn around and vote for him. Here's one of my favorites from Jennifer Rubin, who supported him. This is why it's so funny. Yes. Chris Christie's despicable endorsement of Trump.
Grr.
Right. Here's the guy that I gave my heart to, and look what he did. He turned around and he dissed me for this other guy.
Yeah. That does happen.
Do not fall in love with candidates. They will break your heart. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to hire them. You're not supposed to marry them.
Yeah. I can't imagine having it happen. I've never really just gotten that excited about anybody for any reason. But it does happen. People do fall in love with their candidates. Can't tell them not to because they don't know what it means not to sometimes. And sometimes it's a once in a lifetime.
The fall is really hard, as with Jennifer Rubin. So last two pieces here. Before I finish cutting you off and ask you what you really think. Right. This one is Michael Cohen. GOP voters want to be lied to, which I think is pretty good. Republican voters are a decidedly unhappy group these days. In the recent Nevada caucus, 6 out of 10 described themselves as angry with the federal government. And in previous caucuses, 4 and 10. Not surprisingly, those ticked-off voters are flocking to Trump. But while it's certainly true that Trump's army of supporters are no fans of Barack Obama, it's their other target of frustration is more worthy of note, the Republican leaders who have refused to stand up to the president they despise. Oh, by the way, given that Trump is, as Rick Wilson put it, the leading Republican candidate, what does that say about intransigence and opposition to Barack Obama? Does that put it in a new light, given that Jeff Sessions and Steve Scalise is the backup ticket in case that Donald Trump doesn't run?
Well, yeah.
Or maybe just David Duke himself.
Maybe. Oh, he's been disavowed. It's pretty amazing. I was just actually struck at how open Republicans have been. I guess rank-and-file Republicans don't have any reason to hide it, but the idea that they were 6 and 10 angry voters, and for how long? I guess it's been years now, not only because Barack Obama is president, but even before then when the chief contest was between him and Hillary in 2008, both being historical figures as potential presidents, but both representing a demographic that's not allowed to be angry officially by the press and the public. Whereas now it's all about, on the Republican side, it's the anger candidate being nominated by a 60% angry electorate. Angry, angry, angry. They can't get enough anger. White anger is powerful and legitimate, whereas minority or women's
See,
anger.
1865.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I guess that's true. Well,
so what he writes is the grievances of Republican voters are not hard to discern. When Republican leaders took control of the House in 2010 and Senate in 2014, they did so by promising to repeal Obamacare, vowing to stop illegal immigration. They said they'd cut spending, take on big government, and challenge or even contemplate impeaching Obama. They failed on all accounts. They've also failed to defund Planned Parenthood, failed to block the Iran nuclear deal, failed to prevent same-sex marriage from becoming the law of the land, failed to kill Obamacare, failed to stop Obama's executive orders on immigration and climate change. Failure, however, was always the inevitable outcome. As long as Obama remained president, the GOP had little hope of forcing him to bend to their will, but it didn't stop them from trying. And the problem is they told Republican voters they could, and they basically lied to them. And so now the Republican base is unhappy, and they're getting to the point where they say, we don't care if we lose in November. We just want you guys out.
Yeah. Although, I will say, I mean, that's sort of been a recurring theme for Republican voters for a long time. They even in the culture war, where they seem to be winning some of the battles, the big stuff, I mean, how long have we been noting that the biggest Republican fundraising juggernaut there has ever been and continues to be is send us money and I promise I'll get rid of abortion. It's 40-something years now. And restrictions, yes, put it in the most cramped box it's ever been in and threaten its very legality, true, but they've never delivered and it's never stopped anybody yet. So I'm not entirely certain that they give up on these guys.
That may be, but we shall see what happens. What we may have is just the biggest split ever between the base and the elite. That is to say, the base will vote for Trump, and the elite will, maybe 2/3 of them fall in line, but a third won't, and that's a big deal. Finally, I have this rant from David Frum on the state of the Republican Party that I thought was interesting in tweet form. And he starts out by saying, model of a broken party. And he talks about elected leaders like Jeb and Christie caring more about their wounded feelings than stopping Trump. That Christie reference and the Jeb reference have to do with Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
Jeb, of course, has this big feud with Rubio because he wants to be the leader in Florida and thinks that Rubio is an ungrateful whelp who, backstabbed Jeb, his mentor. Christie, there was this whole big story in the New York Times that was just fascinating about how the Republican establishment couldn't get their act together. And at the end of all of this, Christie drops out of the race, and Rubio, putting his feelings aside about being sliced and diced and filleted by Christie on stage for repeating himself robotically, does a outreach to Christie to try to get his support. But, of course, Rubio being incompetent, he leaves a phone message.
Yes.
And the phone message says something. Rubio's 44, Christie's 52, 53. And Rubio leaves a message for the older guy saying that, please call me. I think that your future is bright in Republican politics. Let's get together.
Yes.
Christie decides that he's incredibly offended by this. Who the hell are you to tell me what my future is, you young whippersnapper, and decides to support Trump.
Yeah.
Because he sees Trump as leading and he's going with the winner. So that's what Frum is referring to there.
All right. Well.
It's a great story.
I can
and it's a great story because it tells you how they lead.
Yes. True.
Rubio doesn't know what he's doing. And Christie reacts to, oh, you insulted me? I think I'll bomb you.
Yeah. Helpful. Exactly
right?
What we need.
So it is helpful in terms of looking at their temperament and, who should be in the White House. I think it's great in that regard. So, again, model of a broken party. Elected leaders, Jeb, Christie, care more about wounded feelings than stopping Trump. Donors care more about their issues. The Export-Import Bank. Sure. No, seriously. They care more about that. Cutting Medicare than stopping Trump. The brains of the consultant class turned to rock about 1995. Anyway, they care more about fees than stopping Trump.
True.
Congressional Republicans self-deluded that they can save themselves even if the top of the ticket craters or splits. In that New York Times article, that fascinating New York Times article, Mitch McConnell basically said, if Trump is the nominee, we'll have to assume he loses, and let's talk about how we can isolate the Senate from whatever happens at the top of the ticket. So, in other words, what happens is that McConnell assumes that he can somehow, everything McConnell does or says is seen from the lens of what's good for the Senate, or what's good for the Republican Senate in particular.
Yes, well, okay, that is his job.
That's his job. So he says, okay, well, if Trump wins, that means we lose. Therefore, how can I protect my majority? Therefore, let's basically run ads against Trump. Let's just completely separate ourselves, as if this is possible. That's why he's this congressional Republican, self-deluded, that they can save themselves even if the top of the ticket craters or splits. Isn't the point here, he says, that if a great political party is so vulnerable to fraud, as obvious as Trump, that it was unhealthy to start with? Now, you hear elite Republicans blaming the base, as if voters existed to serve party priorities rather than the other way around. That's something you said for a long time, David. It's not, why are people voting for Trump? Because they like what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, it certainly has it back. It's a great, I thought the best point of all of them. I mean, there were some other good ones in there to be sure. That's why the rant was so interesting. But yeah, good reminder. To think of that relationship backwards is incredibly dangerous for the longevity of your party.
Right. After the 2012 defeat, he goes on to write, elite determined its solution, gang of eightism, within hours, meaning they never listened to anybody but themselves. Now, Frum is a big anti-immigration guy, so you have to filter that in. Never ever was there a reckoning with something way more important than the campaign in 2012, the presidency of 2001-2009. You know who that was. Correction. One analysis was allowed of the Bush presidency. Too much domestic spending, as if that were any actual voter's top 10 concern.
Oh. Yes,
now,
another good point.
GOP seems headed to debacle, conservatism for a crack-up, and the best advice we hear is talk more about Trump University. Trump view is a scandal, so is tactically allowing 1 million illegal migrants per year rather than offend the National Restaurant Association. So is withdrawing Medicare coverage from under 55 to finance a tax cut for those who've taken 100% of all economic growth since 2010. Now, that latter one I can go with. The former one, of course, remember, Frum is still a conservative.
Yeah.
So he's got this thing about immigration. So is promising every year for 7 years to develop a healthcare alternative and then presenting one-page concepts as plans. And again, I remind people, Mexican immigration is actually negative these days. So, the problem takes care of itself over time. So is installing as your party's power brokers a collection of TV and radio talkers who earn their livings by demeaning 2/3 of America. So many scandals. Now they are coming home. And I say, Frum says, this is not to despair, but to urge action beyond more anti-Trump attack ads. As T.S. Eliot said, if there are no lost causes because there are no won causes, there's no tipping points. Politics never stops. Act. That's true if you're for reproductive rights. That's true if you're for voting rights. It doesn't stop. If you want an anti-racist party, you can't just stop working because we got something done in the 60s. This is a constant thing. He's absolutely right. You got to continue to act. And that's why I say to my fellow progressives who might be supporting Bernie over Hillary, if Hillary is the nominee, you got to get behind this because look at what we're fighting here. That fight never stops.
That is true.
And after these guys are gone, that fight will still go on.
And you will also, ultimately, if nothing else, you're going to have to reconcile your insistence that she'll never fall in line with what will eventually come from Bernie Sanders himself. You really need to fall in line.
Right.
You don't have
anyway,
to.
That's my rant for today.
But,
Thanks so much for having me on. What do you think of all that?
I don't know. Let's go on to something else.
You went to the assertive school of punditry, right?
Yeah, what's that?
Whatever.
There needs to be more of that.
It's like the most important election in your lifetime. Yeah. Life or death issues on the line here. We're talking about KKK and racism, and you know what? You got to make up your mind and vote tomorrow, don't you?
What? I don't know. I have bad earphones. I can't hear you.
Don't you have to vote tomorrow? Have you made up your mind?
I could have voted Saturday.
It's entirely your right to vote in the privacy of your voting booth.
Yes.
But haven't you made up your mind?
I have. I'm definitely going tomorrow.
Well, let me ask you this: if you go tomorrow,
right? I am. I will.
And they asked the question, when did you make up your mind about who you voted for?
Oh.
What are you going to answer? In the last day, in the last week, or I made up my mind a long time ago?
Probably pull the fire alarm if that happens. Oh, help, fire. I don't see any fire. I haven't lit it yet. Hang on. When did I make up my mind?
Tomorrow? Is it today? Was it in the last week?
Yeah, probably in the last week.
Probably in the last
I
week
think
or so.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't put you on the spot. It's just a question.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask someone else when I made up my mind. I'll listen to the tapes. That'll probably tell me more than anything else. Yeah, well, I passed on the opportunity to vote in-person absentee, as they call it, on Saturday. I guess I'll just I wanted to do the Tuesday thing. I'm here for it. Might as well have the whole experience and walk over to the school. They closed the schools, by the way, so that we could do our voting. They usually do that, but this time they decided. I think they actually changed their mind. They had a 2-hour delay, thinking, "Oh, everyone will come and vote in the morning." I'm not really sure what that was supposed to be about, because we vote in the schools very frequently around here, and it presents apparently a security issue. They just prefer to close the schools and let the adults take over for the day. Mm-hmm. So, interesting. So the kids will be running around in the background while I'm supposed to be doing a show and, I would say making up my mind about what to do, but I guess that will be done. But there will be no peace for me.
Are you going to vote early, vote late?
Maybe right after the show. So everyone will have a chance to tweet in and change your mind.
So listen, folks, if you're listening, go to hashtag KITM and tell Kagro what to do.
Right.
Because he's not sure.
Yeah. No. Well, you can certainly tell me what to do. That's no doubt.
Doesn't mean he'll listen.
Right. Absolutely not. But yeah, tomorrow will be, we'll make for an interesting day. Certainly, and then we'll watch all the returns come in, and then Wednesday will be a big one, and we'll have Joan on hand to help us analyze that too, and we'll see whether it all comes out like the polls said, or whether we need to yell at pollsters.
Well, there's all of that. All right. Well, thanks so much. Again, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning. I'll try not to be insufferable on Wednesday or Tuesday or Monday or any other day I'm on. I just call him as I see him.
Someone has to suffer eventually.
But right now, another thing to mention is the delegate race, of course. And in that, right now, if you include the superdelegates and endorsements, Clinton is 519 and he is 86. They all count.
Yeah, eventually.
And if you want to look at it the other way, we'll wait till tomorrow, and then we can look at it the other way.
Yeah, no point in running the numbers just yet. Wednesday will be fine. Mm-hmm. And, although I will say, I'm never really in favor of counting the superdelegates until we're basically on convention eve. Not because I think that the numbers will change a great deal, but because, technically they're not pledged, and we sit and wait for a little while. And but as more primaries are behind us and the pledged delegate count begins to mount on one side or the other, there's less and less likelihood, less and less possibility, really, that any of the unpledged superdelegates who have publicly committed to one position or another are going to change, unless it is those. I mean, if a candidate begins to fall way behind and the door is just beginning to close on them, then perhaps you would see some movement, but not just yet. So I like to leave them out of the count at this point.
Right. Anyway, on the GOP side, let me just mention, I don't know if I did the actual CNN ORC numbers, which is why everybody's panicking today on the GOP side. Trump 49, Rubio 16, yes. Cruz 15, Carson 10, and Kasich 6. So if you're a Republican and you haven't panicked yet, you missed the boat. You should have panicked a little while ago. But it's not too late. You can panic before tomorrow.
I wouldn't mind seeing you do that. So please go ahead and panic publicly. I'm enjoying it. Doesn't really mean anything, and I don't think you'll fix it.
Right. On the Democratic side, there were numbers somewhere. Let's see if we can find them. Clinton 55, Sanders 38 from January. That's 3 points up for Clinton, and Sanders unchanged. And so that gives you a state of the race right now. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll see what Dave is going to talk about for the whole rest of the hour, right?
I better figure it out soon. I have to make up my mind on that, too.
Okay, buddy, you're
All
on.
right.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Greg, for keeping us up to date. I was just scanning over a few things here. I want to open up Pocket again, and of course we have a number of interesting items to get to. Did I file away? I wonder whether I archived that very interesting, I think I did, Vox piece that had the chart of all the superdelegates. I have to come back to the idea. Still something I think would be interesting, although it might become irrelevant but by the time I'm able to produce the thing. But the idea, really wasn't kidding, that we ought to do something like a better know a superdelegate. I liked the idea of looking into as many of them individually as was possible. And the reason that came back to mind, I mean, the weekend pretty much wiped that out for me. Stopped thinking about it entirely. Where did the Vox piece go? How come I don't have that handy? I should have bookmarked that. But you remember the one I was talking about? You may, but it won't help me bring it up unless one of you has the link handy. I could go back into our podcast posts and dig it up, but I thought, there it is. How's that one? There it is. I left it right where I wanted it. The every single Democratic superdelegate in one chart, and there was one in particular I thought I would bring up by way of, I think, helping to explain South Carolina. Not that I think it needs any explaining. I think Greg has done a perfectly, I guess, really rounded it up everywhere. That one piece I wanted to add was, see now, is he not listed? There we are. Interesting. The Vox chart has illustrates the superdelegates themselves. If you, like I say, if you go through the filter and you filter out the South Carolina superdelegates, filter them out by state, they have little stick figure. I mean, I guess you can't really say they're caricatures because they're stick figures, but they're supposed to designate who is who and give some indication, for instance, of their gender, for one thing. And in some cases, their age by drawing either someone with male pattern baldness, for instance, for hair, or longer hair, supposedly, I guess, indicating women, which is interesting. Okay, so here's the deal. South Carolina has, 6 superdelegates listed. The first being Jim Clyburn, who is the Democratic, is he the whip? I believe so, in the House. And so by virtue of his membership in the House of Representatives, a superdelegate. And then a couple other names. Boyd Brown, and this one will make, ring bells for bad memories for a lot of people, particularly over at Daily Coast. Donald L. Fowler, yes, superdelegate. Gilda Cobb Hunter, Jamie R. Harrison, and Kay Lingle Kuntz. But they have listed here Jamie Harrison. The stick figure has longish looking female hair. That's not accurate. Jamie Harrison is a man, for one thing, and a black man at that, and the chairman of the Democratic Party in South Carolina. So it's okay. I mean, it's a very big list, and they clearly, I don't know who everyone is either. I certainly wouldn't have been able to tell you that was a mistake yesterday, but today I do know about that. And of course, so he's listed as he's listed as himself, but the picture is female. But I just thought I'd point this out. I mentioned to you that South Carolina is a bit ahead of the game in terms of the black community of Democratic voters putting themselves out front and claiming leadership positions for themselves, to which they are fully entitled by virtue of the fact that they are the machine that delivers Democratic votes in South Carolina. And though they are though African-American voters, African-American Democrats are likewise the heart of the Democratic vote-generating machine in a lot of southern states, they are not as widely represented in the leadership of the Democratic state parties in some southern states as they are in South Carolina, where they've really been fairly successful. But Jamie Harrison, I thought I would point that out. Not only, he's actually a very interesting figure. Now, if you wanted to fill in the background on him and get to know him a little bit and do the better know superdelegate thing, maybe it's something we should save for later, but I've already started down this path. Sanders supporters will raise some eyebrows at the end, I suppose we'll say. What kind of guy is he? What's his background? He's been a leader in the Democratic Party for some time. Actually, former executive director of the House Democratic Caucus, the United States House of Representatives Democratic Caucus, and director of floor operations and counsel for former House Majority Whip, when they were on the majority side, James Clyburn. So a Clyburn aide and protege, I suppose you could say, who now sits atop the Democratic Party apparatus in South Carolina. He's chair of the party, member of the DNC Executive Committee, Association of State Democratic Chairs, representative for Southern states. So a real and fairly serious player both in national and state Democratic politics. What the one thing that I would say probably raised some eyebrows among Sanders supporters, because he's a superdelegate by virtue of what? By virtue of having worked his way up the ladder. Of course, he was probably helped enormously in working his way up the ladder by working for the top-ranking Democrat in the state, Jim Clyburn. But, that's a way to work your way up the ladder, isn't it? You find yourself in the employ of a top Democratic leader and learn the ropes and help him organize his base, and then he in turn can help you organize your base for your rise up the ladder. The thing that will raise eyebrows is that the biography from which I was reading, in this case, was not Wikipedia, but rather his biography as a principal in the Podesta Group, which you'll all recognize, of course, as John Podesta's operation, which, of course, you'll all recognize as someone who's very closely related to and backing the Hillary Clinton candidacy. And so no surprise there. But then it should be no surprise either that even without that, where do you think Clyburn lies in all this? Where would Jamie Harrison's cues be coming from if he was taking them from his political mentor, which would make a great deal of sense? He'd be landing in the same place. So I don't think there's any ground lost there. But if you're looking to consider, the size of the victory of organizing for the Clinton campaign in South Carolina, consider that not only have African American voters there really got a tremendous amount of clout in the Democratic Party, but the leaders who have organized that clout are in the Clinton camp and always have been and will remain there, and are serious and forceful and effective organizers. And it might not play out the same in other states where that's not the case, but you've got essentially some real live super pros at the top of the Democratic Party there, and good. It reflects credibly on them that not only that they did such a tremendous job, but what a powerhouse operation to have delivered that size of a share of Democratic voters overall. Speaks very well of them, certainly, and but will be no surprise that that was a machine that was always available chiefly to the Clinton camp and not really to the Sanders camp. And, outreach can only go so far in breaking that kind of relationship. Those are things that have to be built for years on end and many, many years in advance. And they're not easily, that kind of relationship is not easily disrupted. And it's not easy to dip in and peel off votes from a relationship like that. So I just thought I'd kind of throw that out there and see whether that helps to explain things. I have a few more notes here from Greg. Let's see, what else might we add? Are these things you forgot about, or were things that were reactions to what we were talking about? Let's see. We've got the Democratic delegate count from over at Real Clear Politics. Let's see. GOP implosion over Trump's candidacy has arrived. The implosion that Republicans hope to avoid arrived so virulently this weekend that many party leaders vowed never to back the billionaire and openly questioned whether the GOP could come together this election year. We'll see. There's no sense in trying to overestimate the ability of Republican voters to put facts and logic aside when there's an election immediately on the line. Not too worried about that. Let's see. And, let's see. Don't assume conservatives will rally behind Trump, says Nate Silver. So, I don't know. We kind of have to pay some serious attention to that one, too. Let's take a quick look at what his reasoning is. He often comes up with something we hadn't viewed before. Ooh, this is one of the worst photos of Donald Trump I've ever seen, illustrating this piece over at 538. Don't assume conservatives will rally behind Trump. I was assuming that, so why not? If Donald Trump wins the Republican presidential nomination, he'll have undermined a lot of assumptions we once held about the GOP. He'll have become the nominee despite neither being reliably conservative nor being very electable. Supposedly the two things Republicans care most about. So again, we've seen them abandon the things that they care most about or were thought to care most about before. Let's say small government, for instance. He'll have done it with very little support from party elites, although with some recent exceptions like Chris Christie. Oh, and by the way, I wouldn't exactly call him a party elite, but let's add Maine Governor Paul LePage to that one. But I can make a much more spectacular case for reporting that news with a different piece that maybe we'll throw that one in next. Anyway, he'll have attacked the Republican Party's three previous candidates, Mitt Romney, John McCain, and George W. Bush, without many consequences. True, although that's privately done almost all the time anyway. And among the party elites, it's just hidden from public view. We plebes don't get to see that very often. If a Trump nomination happens, it will imply that the Republican Party has been weakened and is perhaps even on the brink of failure, unable to coordinate on a plan to stop Trump despite the existential threat he poses to it. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, indeed, the coordinate on a plan to stop Trump link in Nate's piece is in fact to the New York Times piece that I believe I had in mind to tell you a little bit more about LePage. So we'll go to that one next. Major partisan realignments do happen in America on average about once every 40 years. And realignments is a term that's being thrown around a little bit in the last couple of days. I once again was on the Virtually Speaking Sunday show with Jay Aykroyd yesterday, and that came up again too. And really, I'm having a great deal of difficulty envisioning it. So, it's good for me to read over Nate Silver's explanation of it. I don't know if I buy it necessarily, but at least I'm fairly certain he'll come up with some sort of explanation that makes sense about why we ought to give some consideration to this possibility. I don't know whether it really predicts it accurately, but we'll see. The last realignment, which involved the unwinding of the New Deal coalition between Northern and Southern Democrats, is variously dated as having occurred in 1968, 1972, and 1980. There are also a lot of false alarms, elections described as realignments that turn out not to be. That's what we're used to. This time, we might really be in the midst of one. It's almost impossible to reconcile this year's Republican nomination contest with anyone's notion of politics as usual. If realignment is underway, then it poses a big empirical challenge. Presidential elections already suffer from the problem of small sample sizes, one reason a lot of people vote, certainly including us. shouldn't have, one reason a lot of people, why did I say vote? One reason a lot of people, certainly including us, shouldn't have been so dismissive of Trump's chances early on. Here we are. Elections held in the midst of political realignments are even rarer, however. The rules of the old regime, the American political system, party system, circa 1980 through 2012, might not apply in the new one. And yet, it's those elections that inform both the conventional wisdom and statistical models of American political behavior. This doesn't necessarily mean we'll be completely in the dark. For one thing, the polls, although there's reason to be concerned about their condition in the long term, have been reasonably accurate so far in the primaries. And some of the old rules will still apply. It's probably fair to guess that Pennsylvania and Ohio will vote similarly, for example. Still, one should be careful about one's assumptions. For instance, the assumption that the parties will rally behind their respective nominees may or may not be reliable. True, recent elections have had very little voting across party lines. 93% of Republicans who voted in 2012 supported Romney, for example, despite complaints from the base that he was insufficiently conservative, which is, of course, in many ways the complaint. Well, this time it's the complaint that the elites are making. And in November 2008, some 89% of Democrats who voted supported Barack Obama after his long battle with Hillary Clinton. But we may be entering a new era, and through the broader sweep of American history, there's sometimes been quite a bit of voting across party lines. The table below, which you can't see unless you click through over to 538.com and find this thing, but I encourage you to do so. The table below reflects in each election since 1952 what share of a party's voters voted against their party's presidential candidate. For example, a Democrat voting Republican or for a third-party ticket. There's a lot of fascinating political history embedded in the table, but one theme is that divisive nominations have consequences. All right, so let's see. The share of parties' voters voting against its presidential candidate. 52, I guess when we're talking about Eisenhower. 23% of Democrats voting against their party's candidate. Only 8% of Republicans. I guess we'll look for the big numbers here. 1972, this is amazing. 1972, Democrats, 33% voting against their party's nominee, and only 5% of Republicans. And, well, that didn't work out very well. But, by the way, for the most part, the Democrats are at the, by far out in front of Republican defectors. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times since 1952. How many elections is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 7 out of 16 times, more than 20% of Democrats have voted against the Democratic nominee for president. That's pretty remarkable. Versus 2 times in what did we say? 17, 16? Dang, what was the number I put to that? 16? Yeah, I think it was 16. Twice out of 16 times that Republicans have done it. And one of them was 1992 when they might well have voted for Ross Perot as opposed to the Democratic candidate. There was more than one, of course. The other time was 1964. We know what that was about. And it was only 20%, only just barely made it. There was a 19 in 1996, but again, Perot was out there again. Typically speaking, I mean, really, this is what you need to see here. All right, the Democratic Party's share of voters voting against its presidential candidate from 1952 forward, I'm just going to read you the percentages. 23, 15, 16, 13, 26, 33, 20, 33, 26, 17, 23, 15, 13, 11, 11, and finally, in 2012, the first time we hit single digits, 8%. Republicans, by contrast, spend a lot of time in single digits. Since 1952, the percentage of Republicans voting against its presidential candidate, 8, 4, 5, 20, 14, 5, 11, 15, 7, 8, 27, again that's 1992, 19, 9, 7, 10, 7. Really only a few times even getting into double digits. So let's see. How long is this piece, by the way? I can't tell from the scroll on this 538 site. It's sort of whited out. But anyway, in 1972, Silver continues, for instance, about a third of Democrats voted for Richard Nixon rather than George McGovern, who won the Democratic nomination despite getting only about a quarter of the popular vote during the primaries. The Democrats' tumultuous nomination process in 1968 was nearly as bad, with many defections to both Nixon and George Wallace. The 1964 Republican nomination of Barry Goldwater produced quite a few defections. Primary challenges to Jimmy Carter in 1980 and George H.W. Bush in 1992 presaged high levels of inter-party voting in November. There are also some exceptions. Republicans remained relatively united behind Gerald Ford in 1976, despite a primary challenge from Ronald Reagan, and there were high levels of Democratic unity behind Obama in 2008, although one can argue that a party having two good choices is a much lesser problem than it having none it can agree upon. Overall, however, the degree of party unity during the primaries is one of the better historical predictors of the November outcome. That could be a problem for Republicans whether they nominate Trump or turn around and nominate Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, or John Kasich. Significant numbers of GOP voters are likely to be angry either way, besides which they can take pride in that anger that they're allowed to have, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that Republicans are bound to lose. I'd agree with David Plouffe's assessment that a general election with Trump on the ballot is hard to predict, and that Trump could lose in a landslide or win narrowly. But if I would bet on an anti-Trump landslide, if I wouldn't bet on an anti-Trump landslide, I'm also not sure I'd bet against one. The presumption that presidential elections are bound to be close is itself based upon an uncomfortably small sample size. While 3 of the 4 elections since 2000 have been fairly close, most of them between 52 and 96 were not. Furthermore, the closeness of recent elections is partly a consequence of intense partisanship, which Trump's nomination suggests may be fraying. Although I suspect it may just be a different kind of partisanship, not necessarily an allegiance to a Republican Party apparatus and whatever they hand you, but still an allegiance to the same toxic mix of issues, essentially. The last partisan realignment between about 68 and 1980 produced both some highly competitive elections, 68 and 76, and some blowouts, 72 and 80. Although what voters will do ultimately will be more important, it will also be worth watching how Republican Party elites behave and how much they unite behind Trump. On Twitter this weekend, there was a lot of activity behind the hashtag #NeverTrump, with various conservative intellectuals and operatives pledging that they'd refuse to support Trump in November. Rubio's Twitter account employed the hashtag also, although Rubio himself has been ambiguous about whether he'd back Trump. It's reasonably safe to say that some of the people in the Never Trump movement will, in fact, wind up supporting Trump. Clinton, very likely to be the Democratic nominee, is a divisive figure, and some anti-Trump conservatives will conclude that Trump is the lesser of two evils. Others will get caught up in the esprit de corps of the election. Some of them might be reassured by how Trump conducts himself during the general election campaign or whom he picks as his running mate. I think this bakes in the assumption that, the esprit de corps of the election that's the aim of having national conventions and to nationally televise them. That's the whole point of having them, and don't discount their ability to make people do things they swore they never would. Now, Nate continues here, I'd be equally surprised if there were total capitulation to Trump. Instead, I'd expect quite a bit of resistance from Republican elites. One thing this election has probably taught us is that there are fewer movement conservatives than those within the conservative movement might want to admit. I have a piece on that as well. Let's see where he gets his from. Rank and file Republican voters aren't necessarily all that ideological, and they might buy into some of the Republican platform while rejecting other parts of it. Sure, Happens all the time. They might care more about Trump's personality than his policy views. That happens too. But there are certainly some movement conservatives, and they have outsized influence on social media, talk radio, television, and in other arenas of public political discourse. And if you are a movement conservative, Trump is arguably a pretty terrible choice, taking your conservative party and remaking it in his unpredictable medley of nationalism, populism, and big government Trumpism. If you're one of these ideological conservatives, it may even be in your best interest for Trump to lose in November. If Trump loses, especially by a wide margin, his brand of politics, whatever it might be, will probably be discredited, or his nomination might look like a strange one-off black swan that you'll be better equipped to prevent the next time around. You'll have an opportunity to get your party back in 2020, and your nominee might stand a pretty decent chance against Clinton, who could be elected despite being unpopular, quite unpopular, because Trump is even less popular, who would be aiming for the Democratic Party's fourth straight term in office. But if Trump wins in November, you might as well relocate the Republican National Committee's headquarters to Trump Tower. The realignment of the Republican Party will be underway, and you'll have been left out of it. And I guess that little last bit I toss out there, kindness of my heart to you, Mitch McConnell. It's an enormous risk that you're taking. I understand that you're watching out for your constituency inside the House, or rather the Senate Republican Conference. And I understand the initial instinct to want to distance. I mean, everyone can understand the initial instinct to distance yourself from Trump. But there does remain the possibility that the guy wins, which, as much as a disaster as it might be for all of the rest of us, I don't imagine it would go very well for those of you actually inside Washington and looking to exercise influence there. Not just power, but influence there. I mean, you're still the Senate, and of course you understand the rules of the game and how the Senate can and can't be used, and you might be able to use your power center in the Senate to stifle even an outspoken Republican President Trump. But on the other hand, there's also the possibility to keep in mind that Trump arrives in D.C. as an empty suit of a president with strong personality, yes, but a blank slate policy-wise. And the opportunity to embed your own people in his policy shop and thereby direct the Trump presidency, well, the opportunity is a great one, but it is imperiled by the possibility of having run against him the whole way through the election. I'm not certain how that comes out for you, but what do you care? You're not taking my advice. And I frankly would advise you not to take my advice anyway. I might actually accidentally steer you in the right direction, and we wouldn't want that happening. All right, so a couple of pieces that I mentioned were one-offs from this that I thought would help fill in some of the blanks about Trump and what's happening in the Republican Party. Where is the Times piece that I had? I know I set that one aside too, but that may be in my email. But I can go off of the link in Nate's piece here. There we are, on the part about coordinating a plan to stop Trump. This is fairly amazing, and I've already given away the big punchline here, but you might enjoy this piece anyway. Inside the Republican Party's desperate mission to stop Donald Trump. This is a big piece over the weekend in the New York Times. Alexander Burns, Maggie Haberman, and Jonathan Martin. You couldn't put bigger names on this story. So what's the big payoff here? The scenario Karl Rove outlined was bleak. This is, they're at war, these two, of course. Trump hates or purports to hate Rove. I put purports in there, too, because yesterday, I mentioned again, I was on Virtually Speaking on Sunday, and there were some questions about who would be Trump's Dick Cheney? Who's going to help him with the insider game in Washington who knows where the bodies are buried and knows how to pull the levers and might end up being the behind-the-scenes puppet master. That's a big question if Trump really is just sort of a bonehead, knows how to get himself elected but doesn't know what to do once he gets there. And I think the best answer available, actually, came from the other guest with me on the show, Culture of Truth. You know him as Bobblespeak and on Twitter, and Culture of Truth, the segments that he records every week for the Virtually Speaking show on Sunday. You got to hear him live and in person rather than pre-recorded on yesterday's show. Best answer, I thought, came from him. Dick Cheney might be the only person to be the Dick Cheney for Donald Trump. And it's so outlandish and so outrageous, it just might happen. Anyway, I guess another possibility is he somehow buries the hatchet with someone like Karl Rove. And, dumber, stranger things have happened. We'll all be shocked, et cetera, like Jennifer Rubin is. But like I said over the weekend on Twitter, it's almost as if everyone has forgotten what sort of bedfellows politics can make. Strange ones, in case you don't remember. So, the scenario Karl Rove outlined was bleak. He helped convene this big Stop Trump confab in D.C., addressing a luncheon of Republican governors and donors, interesting mix, in Washington on February 19th. He warned that Donald Trump's increasingly likely nomination would be catastrophic, dooming the party in November. But Mr. Rove, the master strategist of George W. Bush's campaigns, insisted it was not too late for them to stop Mr. Trump, according to 3 people present. At a meeting of Republican governors the next morning, Paul R. LePage of Maine called for action. Seated at a long boardroom table at the Willard Hotel, he erupted in frustration over the state of the 2016 race, saying Mr. Trump's nomination would deeply wound the Republican Party. Mr. LePage urged the governors to draft an open letter to the people, I tell you, disavowing Mr. Trump and his divisive brand of politics. I don't know how you address anything to the people. That's such grandiose nonsense. But okay, an open letter. Fine. The suggestion was not taken up. And since then, Mr. Trump has only gotten stronger, winning 2 more state contests and collecting the endorsement of Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. In public, there were calls for the party to unite behind a single candidate. In dozens of interviews, elected officials, political strategists, and donors described the frantic last-ditch campaign to block Mr. Trump and the agonizing reasons that many of them have become convinced it will fail. Behind the scenes, a desperate mission to save the party sputtered and stalled at every turn. Efforts to unite warring candidates behind one failed spectacularly. An overture from Senator Marco Rubio to Mr. Christie angered and insulted the governor, the voicemail Greg was talking about. An unsubtle appeal from Mitt Romney to John Kasich about the party's need to consolidate behind one rival to Mr. Trump fell on deaf ears. At least 2 campaigns have drafted plans to overtake Mr. Trump in a brokered convention. And the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, has laid out a plan that would have lawmakers break with Mr. Trump explicitly in the general election. By the way, another, favorite hobby horse of people, the brokered convention. We'll see whether that can actually come to pass, but something that has been threatened since, I don't know when, but certainly for the last couple of cycles, and it just never comes to pass. It's the last thing the party wants, and the big PR show of the convention, the whole point is lost if it was somehow fall to a brokered convention, so they'll do almost anything they can to avoid having that happen. Despite all the forces arrayed against Mr. Trump, the interviews show, the party has been gripped by a nearly incapacitating leadership vacuum and a paralytic sense of indecision and despair, as he has won smashing victories in South Carolina and Nevada. Donors have dreaded the consequences of clashing with Mr. Trump directly. Elected officials have balked at attacking him out of concern that they might unintentionally fuel his populist revolt, or more to the point, perhaps draw a primary challenger who would build on the fuel of his burning populist revolt. And Republicans have lacked someone from outside the presidential race who could help set the terms of debate from afar. The endorsement by Christie, a not unblemished but still highly regarded figure within the party's elite, for whatever reason. He is, after all, former chair of the National Republican Governors Association, landed Friday with crippling force It was by far the most important defection to Mr. Trump's insurgency. Christie may give cover to other Republicans tempted to join Trump rather than trying to beat him. Not just the Stop Trump forces seemed in peril, but also the traditional party establishment itself. Should Trump clinch the presidential nomination, it would represent a rout of historic proportions for the institutional Republican Party and could set off an internal rift unseen in either party for half a century, since white Southerners abandoned the Democratic Party en masse during the Civil Rights Movement. Former Governor Michael Leavitt of Utah, a top advisor to Romney's 2012 presidential campaign, said the party was unable to come up with a united front to quash Trump's campaign. There is no mechanism, he said. There's no smoke-filled room. If there is, I've never seen it, nor do I know anyone who has. This is going to play out in the way that it will. Thanks a lot. Republicans have ruefully acknowledged that they came to this dire pass in no small part because of their own passivity. There were ample opportunities to battle Trump earlier. More than one plan was drawn up only to be rejected. Rivals who backed him attacked him early, like Rick Perry and Bobby Jindal, former governors of Texas and Louisiana, received little backup and quickly faded. Late last fall, although I don't really remember Trump landing any death blows against them either. But okay, late last fall, the strategist Alex Castellanos and Gail Gitcho, both presidential campaign veterans, reached out to dozens of the party's leading donors, including casino magnate Sheldon Adelson and the hedge fund manager Paul Singer, with a plan to create a super PAC that would take down Mr. Trump. In a confidential memo, the strategists laid out the mission of the group they called Protect Us, Protect U.S. We want voters to imagine Donald Trump in the big chair in the Oval Office with responsibilities for worldwide confrontation at his fingertips, they wrote in the previously unreported memo. Castellanos even produced ads portraying Mr. Trump as unfit for the presidency, according to people who saw them and who, along with many of those interviewed, insisted on anonymity to discuss private conversations. The two strategists who declined to comment proposed to attack Mr. Trump in New Hampshire over his business failures and past liberal positions, and emphasized the extreme urgency of their project, extreme urgency being pay us. A Trump nomination would not only cause Republicans to lose the presidency, they wrote, but we will also lose the Senate, competitive gubernatorial elections, and moderate House Republicans. Entirely possible. With bigger issue, fees for them, I think. No major donors commented on the project, and it was abandoned. No other sustained Stop Trump effort sprang up in its place. Resistance to Mr. Trump still runs deep. The party's biggest benefactors remain totally opposed to him. At a recent presentation hosted by the billionaires Charles and David Koch, the country's most prolific conservative donors, their political advisors characterized Trump's record as utterly unacceptable and highlighted his support for government-funded business subsidies and government-backed health care, according to the people who attended. But the Kochs, like Mr. Adelson, have shown no appetite to intervene directly in the primary with decisive force. The American Future Fund, a conservative group that does not disclose its donors, announced plans on Friday to run ads blasting Mr. Trump for his role in an educational company that is alleged to have defrauded students. I guess here we're talking about Trump University, but perhaps another one. No, Trump University it is. But there is only limited time for the commercials to sink in before some of this country's biggest states award their delegates in early March, like tomorrow. Instead, Mr. Trump's challengers are staking their hopes on a set of guerrilla tactics and long-shot possibilities, racing to line up mainstream voters and interest groups against his increasingly formidable campaign. Donors and elected leaders have begun to rouse themselves for the fight, but perhaps it's too late. Two of Trump's opponents have openly acknowledged that they may have to wrest Republican nomination from him in a deadlock convention. They may have to, but can they? I don't think so. Speaking to political donors in Manhattan on Wednesday evening, Rubio's campaign manager Terry Sullivan noted that most delegates are bound to a candidate only on the first ballot. Many of them, moreover, are likely to be party regulars who may not support Mr. Trump over multiple rounds of balloting, he added, according to a person present for the presentation, first reported by CNN. Advisors to Kasich, the Ohio governor, have told potential supporters that his strategy boils down to a convention battle. Judd Gregg, former New Hampshire senator who had endorsed Jeb Bush, said Mr. Kasich's emissaries had sketched out an outcome in which Mr. Kasich probably ends up with the second highest delegate count going into the convention and digs in there to compete with Mr. Trump. Well, I don't know about that. It sounds like the premise might not work out on that one. Several senior Republicans, including Mr. Romney, have made direct appeals to Kasich to gauge his willingness to stand down and allow the party to unify behind another candidate. But Kasich has told at least one person his plan is to win the Ohio primary on March 15th and gather the party behind his campaign if Rubio loses Florida on the same day. In Washington, Kasich's persistence in the race has become a source of frustration. At Senate luncheons on Wednesday and Thursday, Republican lawmakers vented about Kasich's intransigence, calling it selfishness. One senior Republican senator, noting that Kasich has truly contested only one of the first 4 states, complained he's just flailing his arms around and having a wonderful time going around the country, and it just drives me up the wall. But, you had 15 such guys a month ago. McConnell was especially vocal, describing Kasich's persistence as irrational because he has no plausible path to the nomination. Several senators said, well, Judge Gregg says so, though. While still hopeful that Rubio might prevail, McConnell has begun preparing senators for the prospect of a Trump nomination, assuring them that if it threatened to harm them in the general election, they could run negative ads about Trump to create space between him and Republican senators seeking re-election. Mr. McConnell has raised the possibility of treating Trump's loss as a given and describing a Republican Senate to voters as a necessary check on a President Hillary Clinton, according to senators at the lunches. He has reminded colleagues of his own 1996 re-election campaign when he won comfortably amid President Bill Clinton's easy re-election. Of Mr. Trump, McConnell has said, "We'll drop him like a hot rock," according to his colleagues. All right. So let's we're going to skip down a little bit here. The next section of the piece is about the Rubio hope, and I think we all sort of have a pretty good grasp on what that is, and I didn't think there were any really serious surprises in that, but the bombshell of it was the voicemail that he left for Chris Christie, hoping to coax him into endorsing Rubio, hoping he would endorse him, backfired terribly. And I mean, I see why, and maybe it comes down to nothing more than to call Chris Christie and to leave him that cliched message of, you've got a bright future. I don't know that it necessarily is inherently insulting to be told by someone who's younger than you that you have a bright future. But I mean, it's just so rote and dumb that, you'd think you could come up with a more personal message. Anyway, next section is entitled subsection, Verging on Panic. Efforts to reconcile Mr. Rubio and Mr. Bush, the former governor of Florida, have scarcely been more successful than the effort to, reconcile Christie and Rubio. Bush has been nearly silent since quitting the race on February 20th, playing golf with his son Jeb Jr. in Miami and turning to the task of thank you notes, the all-important thank you notes. But nothing developing there. But here comes the entry of Romney into the picture. Romney had been eager to tilt the race and even called Christie after he ended his campaign to vent about Trump and say he must be stopped. On the night of the primary, Romney was close to endorsing Rubio himself. People familiar with his deliberations said, but Romney pulled back, instead telling advisors that he would take on Mr. Trump directly. That's ridiculous. Good luck with that. I mean, nothing I'd rather see than a direct fight between the two of you and you end up looking like an idiot. But apparently we've already seen it. The big taking on Trump directly is going to Fox News and saying Trump has to release his tax returns to prove he's not concealing a bombshell political vulnerability. Well, that came and went. So that's the full extent of what Romney had up his sleeve. Fantastic. So what else have you guys got? We'll finish with this bit here. Already, a handful of senior party leaders have struck a conciliatory tone toward Mr. Trump. In other words, surrender is what they have next. Oh, Mr. Romney will save us. He'll enter the race. No, I won't. He'll endorse Rubio. No, I won't. But I'll take on Trump directly. Ready? Taxes. Oh my God, it's the least effective attack Romney could possibly have launched. The one that didn't even work against him. So what happens then? Well, now it all falls apart. They come away with no plan. They can't convince themselves to get behind any one candidate. They can't even come up with a plan to attack Trump directly independently from outside of the field. So what begins to happen? Kevin McCarthy of California, the House Majority Leader, said on television that he believed he could work with Trump as president. Many in the party acknowledged a growing mood of resignation. Fred Malek, finance chairman of the Republican Governors Association, said the party's mainstream had simply run up against the limits of its influence. There's no single leader and no single institution that can bring a diverse group called the Republican Party together. That thing called the Republican Party together behind a single candidate. Mr. Malek said it just doesn't exist. On Friday, and here's the kicker. Remember how we started this whole thing. On Friday, a few hours after Mr. Christie endorsed him, Trump collected support from a second governor who in a radio interview said Mr. Trump could be, quote, one of the greatest presidents. Not just would be okay, don't worry about it, could be one of the greatest presidents. That governor was Paul LePage, who started the piece off fulminating, raging. We must stop this man. It's a disaster for the party. Well, what's your plan? I don't know. Do you have one? No, I don't either. Well, certainly we'll come up with something. Call in the consultants. Well, we have this plan. No, that's just a plan to pay you. Well, who's got something real? I don't. Me neither. All right. Well, if you can't beat him, join him. I tried. Couldn't come up with a plan. He could be one of the greatest presidents ever. I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords. Is basically exactly what happened here. He just totally knuckled under. Can you imagine this? Mr. Tough Guy, two tough guys, Christie, get the hell off the beach. And LePage, why they gotta stop those, remember when he started raging about, the crazy nicknames of black drug dealers that were ruining all the white people in Maine? Mr. Tough Guy well, you know what? I give up. I think maybe I'll knuckle under to the boss. Maybe I'll, play, Grover to his Scut Farkas after all. Might be the best way out of this. What he hopes to get out of it, I don't know. But maybe that's not even really the issue. Maybe it's really just about, just rather get out of the way of a speeding train. To hell with it. Everybody goes down with the ship. So, that would be pretty interesting. What a great way what a great plan that was. There's another piece that I thought I would throw in here. I guess, thanks to another illusion that Nate Silver had made in his plan. I guess, how did he put it? I should have marked it. But sort of the growing realization among Republicans that there was really not that much that they could do. And maybe there aren't that many movement conservatives after all. Let's move to this piece. Also, I believe, in the New York Times. Where's my pocket? Here we are. Paul Krugman. Ever heard of him? Apparently a very popular columnist among our constituency here. Oh, and I ought to catch up on a few other comments if I have time that have come through on Twitter. But I've had my Twitter screen closed reading all these pieces here. Here's what Paul Krugman adds to the puzzle here. I thought this was insightful too, from a slightly different angle. Twilight of the Apparatchiks. Interesting title. From the February 26th New York Times. Lack of self-awareness can be fatal. Unless you're Donald Trump, I guess. The haplessness of the Republican establishment in the face of Trumpism is a case in point. Of course, his lack of self-awareness is his chief strength. As many have noted, it's remarkable how shocked that establishment has been at the success of Donald Trump's racist, xenophobic campaign. Who knew that this kind of thing would appeal to the party's base? Isn't the GOP the party of Ronald Reagan, who sold conservatism with a high-minded philosophical message, like talking about a young strapping buck using food stamps to buy T-bone steaks? Oh, I thought you were going to say Morning in America. You meant that other kind of thing. Yeah. And by the way, speaking of him as a racist, xenophobic campaigner, I think let's bring a little Chris Rock into it. Part of the reason why the charges haven't exactly rung the right chimes yet is that, as Chris Rock recognizes, there are different flavors of racism, and some of them are apparently more acceptable than others. And I think Donald Trump, I don't know, as even Mike Huckabee says today, oh, well, does anybody really think Donald Trump is racist? Well, yeah, some people do think Donald Trump is racist. A lot of people do. But what kind of racist? He's not, as Chris Rock put it yesterday, cross-burning racist. I don't think that that's really the case, even though, as people have pointed out, good story, well worth noting, as Justice did when he tweeted it to me this morning or passed it along in Skype. Yes, apparently there is a long archived story from the New York papers about Trump's father, Fred, being arrested in the immediate aftermath of an actual honest-to-God Klan rally in the New York area, which I guess you might have forgotten those things actually happened. And so, well, at least it raises a specter that, well, what if he really was involved in the actual Klan? Now, I don't know whether that would be something he would have told his kids about necessarily, and it happened well before Donald was born. This is amazing how old his father is. 1927. His dad was born in 1905. I had to look that up because Trump is, 69 years old? And I was thinking, wait, your dad had to be really old in order for him to be the one arrested at a Klan rally in 1927. And he is very old. Born in 1905, so he would have been about 22 years old. I guess it really could have been him. Anyway, different flavor of racism. I think Donald Trump is involved, and even if his dad was old-style cross-burning, but I think he was even one off from that. He's just sort of like, that aging parent, grandparent, or crazy uncle who starts saying stuff that's blatantly racist, but they don't seem to really realize it, and they don't think of themselves as racist. And some, depending on how much how close you are to them, you can begin to dismiss it as, well, his mind's beginning to go. He's being less careful about the things he says as he gets older, and that's really the issue. Not so much that he wants crosses burned and people lynched. He just is bigoted, which is terrible, but not exactly the same kind of terrible. Anyway, moving on before we get too far into that, to the twilight of the apparatchiks. More to Krugman's point here. Seriously, Republican political strategy has been exploiting racial antagonism, getting working class whites to despise government because it dares to help those people for almost half a century. And an important point there, right? It was never a direct assault. It was never about getting working class whites necessarily to openly, at least, admit that they hated those people. Instead, they hated government because the government was wasting money on those people. Somehow that felt less racist. And that's exactly that's the flavor of racism that we're really talking about when you talk to people who are otherwise friends of yours or relatives and people in relatively good standing with you who say things like that. The government gives away free stuff to those, well, you know who's. And you've all run into that before. And you say, I've never thought of you as racist, but that's a racist thing to say and believe. But I don't know what to make of it. Anyway, so yeah, Republicans have been pursuing that strategy for half a century. So it's amazing to see the party's elite utterly astonished by the success of a candidate who was just saying outright what they have consistently tried to convey with dog whistles. Right. And you know what the reaction has been now that he says it outright? It has been, he's just saying what we all believed. Why, he's coming straight out and being honest. It might be wrong to say so out loud, but gosh, at least we know where he stands. It turns out that the reaction to stripping away the veils is, oh, good. Problematic in its own right. But we're talking about Paul Krugman here, and we want to know what he thinks. What I, Paul Krugman, find even more amazing, however, are the Republican establishment's delusions about what its own voters are for. You see, all indications are that the party elite imagines that base voters share its own faith in conservative principles, when that not only isn't true, It never has been. Here's an example. Last summer, back when Mr. Trump was just beginning his rise, he promised not to cut Social Security, and insiders like William Crystal gleefully declared that he was willing to lose the primary to win the general. In reality, however, Republican voters don't care at all and don't share the elite's enthusiasm for entitlement cuts. Remember, George W. Bush's attempt to privatize Social Security ran aground in the face of disapproval from Republicans as well as Democrats. Yet, the Republican establishment still seems unable to understand that hardly any of its own voters, let alone the voters it would need to win in the general election, are committed to free market, small government ideology. Indeed, although Marco Rubio, the establishment's last hope, has finally started to go after the frontrunner, so far his attacks seem to rest almost entirely on questioning the coiffed one's ideological purity. Why does he imagine that voters care? Oh, and the GOP establishment was also sure that Mr. Trump would pay a heavy price for asserting that we were misled into Iraq, evidently unaware just how widespread that correct belief is among Americans of all political persuasions. So what is the source of this obliviousness? That's the interesting question. The answer, I'd suggest, is that in recent years, and in fact for the past couple of decades, becoming a conservative activist has actually been a low-risk, comfortable career choice. Most Republican office holders hold safe seats, and I would add, hold them by executing the campaign in a box, which plays into this, which they can count on keeping if they are sufficiently orthodox. Read what's in the box. Moreover, if they should stumble, they can fall back on wingnut welfare, the array of positions at right-wing media organizations, think tanks, and so on that are always there for loyal spear carriers. And loyalty is almost the only thing that matters. Does an economist at a right-wing think tank have a remarkable record of embarrassing mistakes? Does a pundit have an almost surreal history of bad calls? No matter, as long as they know how to hew to the orthodox line. There is, by the way, nothing comparable on the Democratic side. Of course, there is an establishment, but it's much more diffuse, much less lavishly funded, that's for sure, much less insistent on orthodoxy and forgiving of loyal incompetence. But back to the hermetic world of the Republican elite, this world has, as I said, existed for decades. The result is an establishment comprising apparatchiks, men mainly, who have spent their entire professional lives in an environment where repeating approved orthodoxy guarantees an easy life, while any deviation from that orthodoxy means excommunication. They know that people outside their party disagree, but that doesn't matter much for their careers. Now, however, they face the reality that most voters inside their party don't agree with the orthodoxy either, and all signs are that they still can't wrap their minds around that fact. They just keep waiting for Donald Trump to suffer the fall from grace that, in their world, always happens to anyone who questions the eternal truth of supply-side economics or the gospel of 9/11. Even now, when it's almost too late to stop the Trump Express, they still imagine that, but he's not a true conservative, is an effective attack. Things would be very different, obviously, if Mr. Trump were, in fact, to lock in the Republican nomination, which could happen in a few weeks. Would his raw appeal to white Americans' baser instincts continue to work? I don't think so, but given the ineffectuality of his party's elite, my guess is that we will get the chance to find out. I think a great point and well worth reminding everyone of. We'll continue with this discussion, no doubt. There's much, much more to come on that front, and we absolutely haven't even scratched the surface of it, nor have we scratched the surface of all of the fascinating subjects that I've got parked away in pocket for discussion in the days to come. We'll, of course, have results of Super Tuesday tomorrow, we'll find out how much longer, I guess it would make sense. I had a nice, I want to at least acknowledge that I was pointed over the weekend to a response by Robert Reich to the Kenneth Thorpe, what would we say about that? Like I said, putting the healthcare plan, the Bernie Sanders healthcare plan through the ringer and coming up with the, coming to the conclusion that health and tax plans that he had proposed were in fact some kind of train wreck for the poor. We guessed at the time that there was going to be a competent response to that. It just hadn't materialized yet, but I want to at least acknowledge that that is out there. Robert Reich has posted it on his Facebook page. I don't have time to read through it, and that seems a little bit unfair, but the clock is the clock, and I wasted it on other subjects, but I wanted to at least shoehorn it in there and let you know that I am aware of it, and that if you are not, you should be as well. But we may find that tomorrow begins to close the door on how much that matters, at least in terms of its ability to change votes during the nominating process. However, it will remain an important subject, and we'll cover it and we'll discuss it because it's going to all of Bernie Sanders' critique of the Clinton candidacy and the Democratic Party in general will continue to be a theme in the primary, even if it might not change who the nominee is, but the success of his candidacy was, at the beginning anyway, always really premised on changing the nature of the campaign that Democrats would run in the fall, and I think that there's very little question that that has succeeded, and that there wasn't much leverage outside of people like Bernie Sanders and possibly Elizabeth Warren, who wasn't going to do it. There wasn't anybody else who could have moved the campaign in that direction, and there was no other way to do it than the way he did. And then where things really began to derail in terms of the effectiveness of that movement, I guess, was when he was confronted with the reality of what it really takes to run a comprehensive campaign for the presidency. People were going to try and ask you to confront other issues and confront them from different perspectives, and you either needed to be prepared for that or be willing to bend to that. And he did his best with it, but it wasn't going to just wasn't going to work out, I don't think. I don't know if there was anything that he could have done with those confrontations that he didn't do. Certainly, I'm sure he's wishing that maybe he wishes for a do-over, maybe not. Or maybe he really just felt like, I'm carrying this message forward. The whole point of my candidacy really is this. And when he got the notion that, well, we may come out of the early contests with enough momentum to carry us late into the season and maybe even possibly win this thing, things began to change. I don't know. We can't yet do the post-mortem. No point in doing that. You have to go out and vote and shake things out tomorrow. I don't think tomorrow will be the end, but I do think if the polls hold, and there's every indication that they just might, certainly it becomes an uphill battle from there. But, people are used to uphill battles, and if you're not, then you can't really count yourself as part of a revolution. They're uphill battles, and they take a long time, too. And I think in the end, your candidate will tell you that as well, and you can take it with a grain of salt if you like, but giving up and walking away after a couple of months seems like you gave less due to the message than it was entitled to in the first place. Anyway, I'll hand over the microphone now to Metaphor Monday on the after show. Wink and Justice will take it from here. Lots to talk about. Dow Chemical in the news. They'd rather pay a $385 million fine than take their chances in front of a Supreme Court without Scalia on their side.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Lots of other interesting and amazing stories coming up as well. How about this one? Activist farmers are telling the corporate food industry that Black Lives Matter. That's an angle I wasn't expecting. And on the last half, a report on Los Angeles seizing and destroying those tiny houses donated to the homeless. Always an interesting story on the after show.